Hello and welcome to Awkward Family Conversations, where we try to help millennials and Gen Z Zoomers figure out life, what they're going to do. I'm joined as always by my younger daughter, Addie, who in a very exciting development has just begun to explore coding as a career. If you've been with us through our 3 and almost 4th season here, you know that Addie's had an interesting career path.
A couple things going on.
She studied audio engineering, but decided that wasn't a career she wanted to pursue. So she graduated with a degree in audio engineering, but decided instead to pursue veterinary medicine and found that veterinary technician work that she was doing was very physically demanding and beyond her ability to manage. So she's looking for other opportunities and believes coding might be that opportunity. So hello, Ed.
Hello, let's hope it is.
Let's hope it is.
My dad had a car. It was a Honda Civic while I was growing up. And at first we were told it was going to be the kids' car when we got our licenses, and that is not what happened until I eventually took it and drove it across the country to Nashville, at which point we had to switch everything over to Tennessee. And if you have an affidavit of a low total sale in Tennessee, that's fine to change car ownership. And you just need to pay $1 for it. But my dad sent me a Venmo request for $5, and I had to haggle him down to $3 to buy my car.
Yes, that's true. We did do that, didn't we?
Yes.
And you got an incredible deal on that too, by the way. I might have.
Sure did.
But I don't ever remember committing that my car was going to be the girl's car.
That's why I said we were told. I'm not sure to what degree that was definite, but that was the understanding I had. And it might have just been a throwaway comment or something that mom was planning on happening. But
all right. Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I don't ever recall committing to giving you guys a car. So
that's not really your style.
No, it isn't, is it? Not that you couldn't have one, we just that we'd talk about it and figure it out. So
well, with that, our topic today is what's the big deal about retiring, also known as all of my career goals.
Yeah, retiring. This is it is a big deal. As somebody who was hoping to be retiring soon, but won't be. Well, it'll be an interesting conversation just on a personal level, because I think, we'll touch on a lot of themes, I think, that are especially relevant to me in my time of life. But, for folks that are out there, younger folks such as yourself, understanding what retirement means just means that, you'll have many years to prepare for it. And you can make sure it becomes what it is that you want from it. And an awful lot of our goals, financial goals, and even some life goals outside of just saving, investing, those sorts of things, all kind of point to a retirement, an unstructured time of life post working, where you have a lot more freedom and flexibility in your life. And we talked a few weeks ago about starting work, right? One of the big life transition is leaving learning and entering doing, the working part of your life, where you spend 40, 45, 50 years of your life working. And, that is a big transition where you go from learning to doing. And that, there's a lot of structure. Oftentimes, most of the time, there's a lot more structure in your life when you have a job. You've made commitments as part of the job. You have commitments as part of the job, and you need, you spend a lot of time honoring those commitments and structuring your life so that you can honor those commitments for work. So what happens when that work goes away, when you no longer have to do that? You don't have to show up in an office. You don't have to have status meetings. You don't have to spend time producing work, whatever form, whatever that looks like. You don't have to leave the house to go to work. I mean, that's actually becoming more and more a thing now too, with work at home. But as work changes, it'll be interesting to see how the changes in work affect changes in retirement. So when you think of retirement, Ed, what is appealing to you about retirement?
My own time.
Yeah.
It's like nobody owns any of my hours.
Yeah.
And I'm
You have
like
no
100%
commitments outside.
just like freedom, the freedom of it sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it does sound appealing, right? Especially if you're, you resent structure and you resent the imposition of demands on your
Yeah, when you're
time.
a little bit of an anarchist,
Well, yeah. I mean,
bit
there's
of an
a, I
appealing
mean,
thing.
well, yeah. I mean, that's certainly a your thing, but it's also a young person's thing, right? I mean, I think, and we talked about this when we talked about the movement from learning to doing. There's resentment that comes. There certainly was with me. I really didn't like the fact that I had to do things that weren't priorities for me because I needed a paycheck, and I needed to make money. And this is one of the reasons we emphasized for you and your sister growing up, is to find a job that you like to do. Minimize the resentment, minimize that antagonism that you feel when you have to do something that you wouldn't otherwise choose to do. And a lot of people live their working lives in that situation. And they make peace with it because it allows them to, support a family, allows them to, travel and do
There's no
things.
other alternative too. There's not really anything else you can do.
Well, that's true. Right. Exactly. I mean, the way, our society is structured, it's a very complex society, and we don't do barter because it's super inefficient. And so, money is the currency, is how everything works better. It's how, since we can't, I don't know how to make a dishwasher, so I buy one. Well, to buy one, I need to do things that I can do and get paid for them, so that I can have the other things that I can't source myself. And
Exactly.
yeah, and as I said, I think, you are a unique person, and you have your own perspectives on work and the kind of things that you like to do. And there's certainly a resentment that you feel, but it's also true that I think a lot of people making that transition from unstructured, flexible learning time to structured, demanding, committed time, in the name of earning a paycheck, there's definitely resentment that exists there too. And, each person, that combination of, boy, I'm really excited about doing this, and boy, I really wish I could stay home today. There's different levels of those of that conflict in all of us, but I think it is in all of us. And when you get to retirement age, when it's time to say, you know what, I'm done working.
It's time to party, baby.
Well, yeah, it's time for me to. I get full agency over my time now. I get,
I'm
and
going
my
out
actions.
every Tuesday at noon. Just leaving the house, just like not doing anything, just leaving the house at Tuesday at noon.
Yeah,
Sounds awesome.
yeah, because you can, right? And
Yeah.
and there is that. I mean, there is a kind of a euphoria when you retire. So I left Schwab's. I left structured work 6 years ago, and it was liberating. But it was an adjustment too. I mean, it was kind of like, okay, I don't have to be up at any particular time, and I don't have to, drag myself in, and I don't have to make myself pay attention in meetings that I, don't find particularly interesting. By the same token, that can be a little unsettling. I was talking today with my friend Roger, who's leaving Walnut Creek. He's, his kids are up and out of the house, and he and Lynn have sold their house, and
Wow.
they're moving on. Yeah. And, he's excited about the possibility, but it's also, he's like, we can go anywhere in the world. We can go to Hong Kong if we want, or Australia, or Europe. I mean, but the fact that you have choice puts pressure on you. I mean, when you don't have choice and you have to do it, that's one less decision you have to make. When you retire, suddenly there are many more decisions you have to make. It does sound appealing to you right now, and it is. I think on balance, most people would say retirement is
like an overwhelming amount of choice over having a manager, like literally every day.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying it's not quite as cut and dried as, oh, this is 100% great and this is 0% great. The fact that
making the mistake that it would be, but it's certainly, I think the idea of having my own time, it's why I've like been interested in the idea of starting my own business and things like that, because I've found that I don't mind working. I don't mind doing work. I'm very good at making myself a schedule, doing things that I don't aren't exciting right now, but are going to pay off for things. I really hate the structure of work. I don't like the hierarchical thing. It's not my vibe at all. So the thing that I'm most excited about with the retirement is like I get to fully be free to decide what I want to do with my time, what I want to make with my time, and how productive I want to be doing whatever I want in a way that I just don't have a choice in that right now.
Yeah, in your current role. I will say when you own your own business, you still have, I mean,
You're still like you have a boss in the way that your customers are dictating what you should
exactly.
be doing.
Your customers dictate what you need, what you do.
It's
So on Saturday
again,
morning,
it's the structure of work that I don't like. I wouldn't mind like customers dictating what they want to see from me and something that I care about where I get to make all the business decisions. I'm down. That's a trade-off that I'm happy for. That's a trade-off I'm willing to make
well, yesterday
over like
morning, Saturday
somebody
morning,
who owns an hour of my labor.
well,
It's
but
not
so
what I like.
your customers own your labor as well. I mean, yesterday, Saturday morning, I had to get up at 7:30 because I had to be in Concord at 8 to open up the business center for people who were using a conference room. I wouldn't have chosen to do that. In fact, I
But you
resented
did
it a little
choose
bit.
the business.
What's that?
But you chose the business.
I did. I did. And, understanding that that's part of it, but yeah, doesn't mean I don't resent it. Doesn't mean I don't, wouldn't have chosen, I wouldn't have chosen to do that on a Saturday morning. I would have
There's
chosen to
always
meet my
tension.
brother for coffee.
The fact that life is a finite amount of time forces tension always in any decisions. So
Yeah.
like I expect that to be around. I mean, when I was in the brief unemployment time of my life, the most I struggled with was the feeling of like not having a purpose. It's like I'm not doing anything that like I'm just not doing anything. I'm playing video games. I'm having fun, but it's like an unlimited amount of fun. Like there's no like I don't have anything meaningful I'm doing. There's no delayed gratification happening right now. There's nothing in the works. And when I was struggling with that, that was when I decided to get back into writing and making more art, because then it was like, oh, I can just give myself a purpose. And unfortunately, I discovered this about 2 weeks before I started a new job. And I was like, oh, darn, I feel like I was really onto something good there. But I like finally embraced like the full freedom of like, I get to decide whatever my purpose is right now. And then I don't anymore.
Oh, but what you just described is many people who go into retirement have that same disassociation or untethered sense that, oh, structure, purpose gives structure, and working certainly helps to provide that. When you don't have that anymore, that's provided externally by a job. You have to find it yourself, or you don't have to find it yourself. The challenge is to find it yourself, or to make peace with the fact that you're just marking time at that point. Because again, when you stop working, there's a huge amount of commitment structure that goes away. Yeah. And those things that had been defined for you are no longer there to define, and it becomes much more on you. It becomes more self-generated and self-directed, and people do struggle with that.
Mm-hmm. Freedom is intimidating.
Freedom can be,
yeah.
Certainly can be, no question about it. At the same time, it's liberating, and it does put essentially all of the onus on you as an individual, as the person, who has to make those choices. And, I'm facing an interesting situation my own self at this point in my life. I'm not retiring, but I'm choosing to go in a whole different sort of career direction. And it's creative, and it will be, success is not guaranteed, of course. And, I suppose it's a risk. I mean, it's definitely a risk. I'm not really thinking about it in that way, but it is. I mean, it's entirely possible it doesn't work out. And then I'd have to choose to do something else. So, which gets into the kind of the time of life. Used to be retirement was, for the few years before your death, which we'll talk about next week, the ultimate transition from living to not. But, retirement was going to be what used to be a fairly finite time period between when you stopped working and when you died, and it was a reward for a life well lived and work put it, time put into work, which is really if you want to boil it down to economic theory, that's the contributions to your society. The society overall, not your family unit or your own personal growth and your personal relationships, but your contribution to the society overall is your work. And, that was a reward. You got to, I told you, from sort of classic economic theory, that's the lens that it is, but it's a way of thinking about retirement. Now, retirement's, as people's life expectancy has grown, and especially among educated people who have a lot of means, their retirements have stretched on and on and on. Your grandfather has been retired for 25 years.
That sounds awesome.
And and it has been awesome in a lot of respects. He's able to garden every day when he's here, and then they're able to travel quite a bit, but they're able to do that because they are people of means. They're educated people.
And they were in a different generation too, where that was more attainable than it is now as well.
I disagree. I don't think it's any less attainable today. It's just, what sacrifices are you willing to make? Remember that, your grandfather was gone from home 2-3 weeks at a time, basically every month. He wasn't here and he was working. He sacrificed family time for income. The other thing that they did was we rarely went out to eat when we were growing up. They saved a lot of money because they lived very frugally.
Going out to eat doesn't make the difference of millions of dollars.
Well, no, and he does. He's
at the current rate of the cost of living, it's getting harder and harder to retire for long periods of time for people who are approaching that stage in their lives.
Only because they haven't saved the resources.
But the reason they're not saving those resources isn't because they're going out to eat. It's because of the wage disparities now, and it's because of the costs of living. For many people, that's true. And as we've talked about, the cost of living, especially around healthcare and housing, have grown dramatically as a percentage of income, because incomes for average people have remained fairly static. However, if you are educated, educated people tend to make a lot more money. Those wages have not stayed static and stagnant. They have grown. The reason you're doing computer programming, or you're looking at computer coding, is because it's a lucrative field. And if you do that, if you make a career there, you'll be able to have the retirement that your grandfather and that your grandparents have, because you'll have the means to do that. As much as I would love to do that, it's probably not the direction I'd go, because really I see no meaning in having a good life for myself if I'm not helping the rest of the world attain that too. So.
Well, and that's your personal choice. But I'm just saying that there is, for many people, and especially if you're thinking about retirement, when you've got 40 and 50 years to create the retirement that you want, you can create it. But, the thing about going out to eat was just an example of their frugality as they lived.
It's an example of my grandparents' frugality, but it's not really a realistic example that you can use. And just to be able to retire earlier, I can't just not go out to eat as much and then suddenly I'm going to be able to retire early. No,
what you need to do is the equivalent of not spend money that you don't have to spend. That's what it came down to.
But that's not how the saving problem works in America at this point, because the problem is that it's just simply more expensive to be poor. So we can't save up things because we don't own property and we're paying rent, flushing that money down the toilet, even though our wages aren't going up, but our rents are going up. It's not the marginal amount that comes from just choosing not to spend money on things you don't have to spend money on is not what's causing people to not be able to retire.
That's true in some cases. And in some cases, I think it's also, there's two sides of every profit and loss statement. There's a revenue side, which you're saying is lacking. And I agree. There's the data would show that wages, especially for uneducated or less educated people, have stagnated for many years, 40 years or so. And that's changing now. We're seeing wage inflation pretty significant right now, which is encouraging. But I think there's the expense side of the ledger too, is that if you look at spending and how people are spending, they're they're less willing to defer gratification. Younger generations are less willing to defer gratifications than older generations, and
I
part
don't
of
think
that is
that's the
just
whole story, though.
generationally. The great generation with World War II and the sacrifices that had to be made, in the effort. The war effort trained them. The Depression trained them not to spend money if they didn't absolutely have to. And so that's part of the reason that they're in the positions that they are now, that they have the resources at the retirement age that they have now. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I mean, you're right. There is a revenue side of it. There is an income side of it that needs to be addressed. But it's also true that younger generations aren't willing to defer the gratification in the same way that their grandparents were.
That's not true.
I disagree.
That's the way the economic numbers are saying they're spending more money on those things, but that doesn't imply the reason behind it is because they're not willing to defer gratification. Because a lot of the reason why people are going out to eat more often now is because they have more and more people are having to have multiple jobs and don't have time to cook. That's a huge portion of it. So I think saying they're not willing to delay gratification, that's not a fact. That can't be proven true. That's just one interpretation of numbers that are put forward by economists who aren't sociologists and aren't studying the underlying societal causes.
Oh, but there's economists that are studying poverty. I mean, poverty is an important part of an economic view of the world,
Yeah,
and structures of property.
But they're not necessarily structured like the interpretation. The younger generations are willing to defer gratification is just not a true statement.
Well, we're going to disagree on that one. I mean, you've got your perspective, but I do too. And I don't know, that we'll be able to bridge it, but we can try.
I mean,
but we're not going to do it now.
What I'm trying to say is that that's not a valid interpretation. You have one sliver of a whole story while you're jumping to that conclusion. And when you take in the other parts of the story, that's not the conclusion that arises.
That's not the conclusion you draw.
That's not the conclusion most people who study the other parts of the story conclude. Well, that's not just an Addie thing.
Well, I think particularly in economics, there are many views, and they always have been, competing views of the things. Because you're right, you're interpreting data, and you're looking at a wide set of information and data. But yeah, I'm not convinced that what I've shared is untrue or disproven or anything else. I mean, but I'm also willing to say that there's other ways of looking at information and data. And I agree, poor people have taken it on the chin, and there's a lot. Yes, I mean, there's food deserts, for instance, in poor neighborhoods where they can't buy food. So the cheapest way to feed a family is to go to McDonald's, because they don't have transportation that they can get them to grocery stores that have produce. So I get that. I understand that. And I've seen all that. But I still think it's fair to say that there is an expense management side compared to previous generations that is less willing to make the sacrifices in the in the shorter term to get a benefit 40 years away. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just a way, that's just generational differences.
All right.
Right. Now, when you get to retirement, though, I mean, and this is the thing, you've got 40 years to prepare, 40, 50 years to prepare for a retirement. You've got to be thinking about, what do you want from that retirement? And what you've described, I think, is a really exciting, healthy vision of your retirement, where you get to engage with your creativity, where you have accountability and you accept the responsibility of creating, of doing something with your day, finding a purpose in yourself to spend the time.
I'm gonna volunteer so much.
What's that?
I'm gonna do so much volunteering.
Yeah, I mean, that's and a lot of people who retire do. A lot of people who retire, though, are stuck because they haven't prepared and they haven't thought about it. They haven't done it intentionally. I mean, they've intentionally retired, but they haven't thought about what that means. And they don't have relationships. They sit alone a lot. I mean, elder loneliness is a huge issue in the geriatric community, and then I think that a lot of that is because you've got people who've retired and they've gone into living situations because economically they weren't secure. Maybe that's the wrong way to say it, but they don't have the resources that a lot of other people entering retirement do, and they have to make it work. And the choices they have to make, because they have limited choices because of limited resources, then the choices that they have to make are, end up creating loneliness. And there's also the end of life thing when, you're friends with people and they start dying. Your community shrinks unless you're taking the initiative and going out and meeting new people and creating new relationships. And a lot of people in their retirement either don't know how to do that or aren't comfortable doing that. I mean, that's something that I worry about my own self, because I'm not somebody who really goes out and aggressively finds friends.
How big is your running group now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a lot smaller than it was. There's not many of us running anymore because we're getting older.
You have a busier time making friends than you give yourself credit for.
I can make friends, but the running group happened because of your mother. Your mother met people, got into a book club, met Lynn at your preschool where Georgia was. Lynn introduced her to Julia, who had a book club, who invited your mother to join, and
then you all went on a very ill-advised run of Mount Diablo.
Well, we've done a few ill-advised runs through the years, but but the point is that I met people. I tend to meet my friends through other people, and I'm facing a time in my life where I'm very likely to be in a situation, in a city, in a place that I don't know anyone. And it's going to be very interesting for me to see how to make connections when that's not something I've ever done
on your own.
On my own. Right. Exactly. So how do I meet people? Because you're right. Once I meet people, I won't shut up, but it's that initial contact that's the challenge for me. And I think for retirees, for the reasons we talked about, the fact that they're in an aging friend group, that a lot of them don't have the economic resources that allow a full range of choices. So as their children pursue their own lives and move or go other places, they don't, they're not able to follow. And, you get a lot of people end up in these, kind of eddies off to the side of the main current, and, are left behind and left alone. And that's part of retirement too, right? I mean, you're stepping out of a workplace where you're engaged with people all over the place and every day. And you step away from that. And a lot of people's social lives are built around people they work with. That was certainly true when I was at Pacific Bell Directory. We had a very strong friend group there. And, a lot of that still remains today. But, John Aquino, Michael Hilton, Lou Feinberg, all these folks that I still have relationships with, that I see from time to time, that all started in that time. Same with Schwab. I have a lot of people that I knew, but I knew them because of my work. Without the work, I wouldn't have been introduced to these folks. And so I wouldn't have those relationships and those friendships. And so, work provides a lot of things to us. And when that work goes away, all of those opportunities for meeting people, the idea that purpose, that you have an imposed purpose, but it's still a purpose. That all goes away, and it needs to be either replaced or not replaced. And if it's not replaced, what are you going to do with that time that's completely yours to decide?
Yeah, a lot of things.
Yeah. So
Yes.
Retiring is a big deal, no question about it. It's
it's a big change.
It's a massive change.
Even the 3 months of unemployment I had, I knew it was going to end. I knew I was going to go back to work. It wasn't like the definite feeling that retirement is. It was definitely like 2 weeks in, I was like, I really have nothing to do. Like I've got no commitments. I have nothing I have to do.
Right.
This is kind of wild. Like no homework, no class, no meetings. I was like, this is weird. This is super weird.
Yeah.
but I liked it. It was fun. Played a lot
Well,
of video games.
well, and you've got the right approach, I think, which is ownership, right?
Mhm.
Intention. I've got this unstructured time, and I can feel untethered, and I can feel like, oh, great, I have no responsibilities. I can, play with my cats and watch TV and play video games all I want. Or, that's going to be ultimate, or, and I recognize that though, that's going to be ultimately unsatisfying. So instead, I'm going to give myself structure. I'm going to create an exercise plan. I'm going to create, a plan to do art, and I'm going to execute on that. My writing, my art, um, volunteering. These are all ways that we can give ourselves structure and purpose, the kind of things that we don't have externally imposed. We have to impose them ourselves, or we just have to accept that, well, this is just the way things are going to be. And I think a lot of people like that freedom, that they get up in the morning and they can do whatever they choose to do that day.
I mean, that's kind of like the real American dream right there. That's the freedom.
It's certainly a flavor. I mean, it's one flavor of it, that liberty, the freedom to choose every day your thing. There's also the part of the American dream that's about, accomplishing things and kind of moving forward, taking action to move yourself forward, to move your community forward. Those kind of things are also, I think, part of the American dream. I mean, there's a lot of dimensions to the American dream, but the freedom is essential. That choice is an essential part of all of it. And yeah, retirement, it is on you for the most part. It's interesting though, and we've talked about poor people already, and a lot of people won't be able to retire because they don't have the economic resources to do that. I was struck by Charles Schwab, who's one of the richest men in the world. When I went to work at his company, it was second or third all manager meeting. So there was, 400 or 500 of us in the assembly hall watching him, and he got up and he talked, and somebody asked him what keeps him up at night. And he said, the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing that bothers me the most, is that there are people in our country going to bed every night without their retirement secured. So they're never going to be able to stop working and enjoy their family and enjoy their hobbies in a way that other people can. And that was his purpose. That's why he founded Charles Schwab. He became incredibly wealthy because of it. But it started with this idea that, there's a lot of ways to serve your community through your company. And, he certainly, for him, this was the reason he founded Schwab, was so that people could more easily secure their financial future, so they could enjoy their family and their golden years in retirement. And his whole investing strategy is built around long-term, long-range investing. He's not looking for the quick kill and the big gamble that gives you a big stake. He's put it in stuff, let it accumulate. Compound interest is one of the most powerful forces in the world. Just let it go, and keep adding to your nest egg and grow it through time. And in 40 years, you'll have all the resources you need that'll allow you to have the freedom in your golden years. But there are an awful lot of people. I mean, as part of the divorce we're looking at, we've looked to see what's the average savings, the average retirement savings for people who are 62 years old. And average is something like $160,000, which is not very much. Invested in a bond that returns, or an income generating portfolio that returns 5% a year, that's $8,000 a year.
That's not much.
That's not much, no matter where you live, right? And so, Social Security was implemented because of this very thing, that you had people that couldn't retire. They had to work. So we created a national income, a national retirement income program, Social Security, that pays people, an amount, and I think for me, my full amount, which I have to wait till 67 to receive, is something like $3,500 a month, give or take. So not bad, about 40,000 a year. That's not going to make me wealthy, but it'll make me secure. I'll be able to buy food. I'll be able to have a place to live. which is the whole point of Social Security. It wasn't really about, oh, you're going to be able to travel to the French Riviera. It was about, we're not going to have old people starving and being out in the streets, living in the streets.
Shouldn't have anyone starving or living in the streets.
Well, you don't want to, but Social Security, I mean, because people at the end of their lives, many people were without resources, without the financial resources, and at that point unable to work, because remember, a lot of the work when Social Security was created was physical labor. What's that?
And that's what we have government for. That's why we organized as a society.
That's right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. The government is us together deciding what we want to do for each other. And, and there's lots of dialogue and, a lot of disagreement and a lot of fighting that happens about it, but it's about very important issues. And it's about how much do we want to help our fellow people? Different politicians think about it differently, but it comes down to what are we willing collectively to do to help other people in our community. And
we use our pooled resources for.
Well, that's certainly how I think about it, and I think how you think about it too. Is that the lottery
pooling resources. So
yeah,
if we're doing that, what are we doing it for? So I want that to be going to making sure no one, but old people included, are not starving on the streets.
Yeah,
no way to live.
I agree. Other people would suggest, that, well, those are choices that people make and they have to bear the consequence of those choices. And I disagree with that pretty fundamentally, but it's a perspective that's held by very many people. Why should I pay for somebody else when I'm taking care of myself? And I think the answer is because you've been blessed with skills and talents and an education and a family structure that allows you to do that. So not everybody has those advantages, but of course, that's not necessarily how people view it. So anyway, that's, the retirement thing, the reason that, we have Social Security is because people weren't able to save for themselves to create, Charles Schwab nightmare that they couldn't secure their own financial future. And there came a point when they couldn't work because so much of the work back in the 20s and 30s when Social Security was created were physical jobs that older people couldn't do. I mean, when you're 65, it's a lot harder to swing a sledgehammer for 8 hours a day. That's tough. And so, you need to have something so you don't have people, just basically relying on privately funded donations, and which are inconsistent. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. It's just that they're inconsistent, and not everybody who's in need has access to those resources. So anyway, Social Security was a way to kind of help people in their retirement, people who are underfunded, like many people are out there. I mean, if the average is 160,000, that means
that's rough.
That means that the median is probably quite a bit lower than that, because the people with a lot more retirement are skewing that 160 up, and there's fewer of them, because if they've got 2, 3, 4 million in retirement assets, then that's bringing that average up a lot. One person is bringing that average up a lot, and you've got 4 people who have less than that for every one person that has more. I doubt it's that concentrated, but still, it's sobering to realize that as you approach retirement, if you don't have your financial future secured, you're going to be relying on Social Security and then other programs to kind of help you manage along with your family and those kind of things. Which is why I say retirement. Be thinking about your retirement when you're 25. So that you can create the retirement that you want. Understand what it means. And as you make your decisions about jobs, about savings, about the money you're going to make and the money you're going to spend throughout your life, save a little part of that decision, or have a little part of that decision, have retirement enter a part of that decision, because it's going to have implications for you at the end of your life. And what do you want that end of life to look like when you can't work? And that's the other thing I want to talk about is what's that?
So we can't really rely on the government to get better at this. So,
well, yes and no. I mean, the government is a blunt instrument, right? It's a huge entity with all kinds of stakeholders and people pulling it on this way and pushing it this way. And it's not going to be super responsive, but it does It's probably the best we can do.
I don't
um,
know. I don't agree with that at all.
I think, yeah, I
I don't
think,
think I think we can do much better than we're doing.
well, so I would agree from a policy standpoint. I agree. I think that from policies, we're being very short-sighted and selfish, which I not approve. But from a process standpoint, I don't think we can do any better because we've been trying to do better for centuries, and
What
not
about
just our government, but governments around the world struggle.
is gerrymandering a system thing or a policy thing then?
That's a policy thing. The
Okay.
process, the
Because I would
process
call
of
that a system thing.
the
But
process of passing laws, of getting commentary, of weighing evidence is how things get done. The gerrymandering is the specific outcome is because the data that's being put in is being manipulated and corrupted, and that's a policy thing, and it's also just a human nature thing about power and power aggregation. But it's not how our government runs. What the problem we have right now is that we've got a minority government in a lot of respects. We've created, I mean, our
also
system was
made
set
the
up to
government to
protect.
be like that. So
I'm sorry, what?
the system was made to be like that. So there's that.
The system was made to protect minority rights, because remember, when we were created, when the Constitution was written, that was a real concern, because Puritans were not given the rights in England, were not protected, systematically protected, because the form of government didn't allow for that. So they did create a stronger, they tilted the field and for minority rights, and that lasted well over, that is a design. That's
the
a
repercussions of that.
The repercussions are that we're getting a lot better at I mean, the people are getting a lot better at manipulating and taking advantage of that fact of the minority government, and they're able to concentrate that through gerrymandering, voter suppression.
So I would say the fact that it was set up by a minority government to be a minority government is a system issue.
Well, I mean, it was the most inclusive government at the time.
Yeah, and I think we can do a bit better now, a couple centuries later.
Well, we have, though. We've added. I mean, we've basically, anybody who's not a felon who's over 18 can vote. So
why can't felons vote?
Well, I agree with you. They should be able to, but but that's a small percentage of our population.
And who's deciding what his felony is?
But those are policy questions, right? And so we decide collectively.
That's just all part of the same system. The policies are coming from the system because the system's built to generate the policies.
And I disagree that the system's built to generate the policies. The policies, we can have different policies, and we have had different policies. We had the great, we had the whole, FDR's, I forget the name of it because I'm old and all, but what's that?
The New Deal?
The New Deal. We had the New Deal, which was a whole different set of priorities than anything that had come before. And we passed it, and it came through using the same processes that are in place that people have used to then suppress votes and gerrymander. I mean, the process isn't the problem as much as the policy.
I see that more as an exception, though, because most of everything else that's come out of it has been, not that.
Well, no, with the whole civil rights administration, then let's fast forward to Lyndon Johnson and the new system, the Great Society, and all of the civil rights legislation that came through that same process. What's that?
All of that's been rolled back.
Not all of it, but a lot of it has. But again, don't blame the process. Blame the people who are making the policy decisions. That's the policy.
No, I'm not it's a bad individual, but it's a bad system if it rewards bad individuals kind of girl.
It's not just bad individuals, it's bad groups of people. It's people with different priorities and different values, and they're holding sway at the moment. But the problem isn't the process. The problem is that we as a country can't come to agreement on what it is that we want to do. We've got very, very different ideas of the future, and neither group has the votes to make it happen.
Doing good.
What's that?
Neither group is doing good.
Well, because there's no consensus
right now.
We don't have a consensus on how we want to move forward, because we haven't had the dialogue that we need to have, because, for a lot of reasons, but part of it is we lack the leadership, and this is not just the US. This is human. nature. This has happened to countries all over the world throughout history. Is the pursuit of power corrupts the outcomes of policy and has tremendous effects for good and evil. When somebody gets their way, it can benefit or it can not benefit a whole bunch of people. And I think, but again, the processes that we've set up do have minority protections in them consciously. It was a design feature, not a bug, but we have exaggerated and concentrated those so that people can stay in power who do not speak for the majority of Americans. But even the majority of Americans, this isn't like it's a 70-30 split here and the 30 are ruling. This is a kind of a 47-53 split, and the 47 is ruling. And for the most part, I mean,
when it comes to things like abortion, that's a 70-30 split.
Well, yeah, I think it's not quite that constant. I think it's more like a 60-40 split, but still, you're right.
Public support for Roe v. Wade is 70-30.
For Roe v. Wade specifically, yes. But for abortion rights more broadly, it's more like a 60-40 deal. But regardless, that's a pretty significant margin. But yes, what you've got is people who corrupted the process.
Yeah, and my response to that is that we should keep trying and build new systems every time. Because, this one failed, let's try something different that doesn't. Like every time we should be trying a new iteration to stop rewarding that pursuit of power instead of just kicking out the power people and then being like, all right, this time it's gonna work. Like I'm over this time it's gonna work thing.
Well, what you're basically, what I hear you saying is that because you don't get the end that you want, you question the means, and you'd be willing to change the means. But the problem with that is that if you do that, that gives more power to your opponents because they can do the same thing. I mean, this is why we have the filibuster, right? Was to create a break on runaway emotional decisions and made in government. And people have perverted that and corrupted it, but it existed to stop it basically it existed.
So my response to that is, okay, so we made this thing, it didn't do the thing that we wanted it to do, let's get rid of this thing and try a different thing. Instead of let's get rid of the people who are abusing the thing we made and just put some new ones in, and this time it'll work. It's like that's not
but it has worked in the past. And here's the thing, here's the corollary that I would make. So I read a book several years ago now, but it was Jared Diamond, who wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel, wrote a book called Collapse. And maybe it wasn't Guns, Germs, and Steel. Anyway, it was an interesting, the point of that, Jared Diamond was the author. I don't remember the book itself, but he talked about how foreign engineers, could have been American or British, whatever, went to Papua New Guinea and saw how the native population was irrigating their crops. We're managing the water flow to irrigate crops. And they had this very inefficient system of, they built terraces on the sides of the very steep hills, and they had this very inefficient system where you had water that would come in at the top and then go down here and then drop and roll down here. And they were like, well, you can do a lot better than this. And they re-engineered the whole thing so that it was more direct and more efficient. And the next growing season came, the rains came, and it washed all the topsoil off the mountain. And, the people that thought they knew better didn't, and created a catastrophe for the community where they re-engineered their irrigation system. The problem with tinkering with things that work is that you can wash all the topsoil off your mountain.
Such a false equivalence, Dad.
It isn't. What you're talking about.
Yes, we live in America. Like, we have seen the inefficient system. Like, the people who are saying we need a new one are the ones who have been suffering the consequences of the system the whole time. We're not just colonizers showing up and being like, sure, wouldn't it be better if we did something else?
It's not the colon. Well, I mean, that's essentially what you're saying is let's do this differently because we think this will work better. Well, we don't know it's going to work better, and it may be worse.
But it's not working now.
It's not working now in the short term for what we want it to, because there's no general.
It's not working in the long term either. We're not going to have a world if we continue on the pace we're on.
be careful what you wish for. Be careful about if you want to remove roadblocks and remove, this is essentially what you're doing, is you're removing the governors that were on the hillside in Papua New Guinea, so that you can do
It's
things
not
more
at
easily.
all. It's a false equivalence.
It
It's
isn't.
not at all
You're
what
talking
it's
about taking away things that will be circuit breakers to stop us from doing something we don't intend to do. And yes, it's frustrating, and yes, it's a problem that we have a minority government. I get
What's
that.
the catastrophe that would happen?
Well, so I mean, so you know the book The Handmaid's Tale, right? Gilead, right? You start taking away process.
I'm not talking about taking away like little parts of the government.
You're talking about,
You're throwing away the whole thing.
well, so then, yeah. So to what? Yeah. Well, good luck with that, because again, when that's been tried before, I mean, you've heard of the French Revolution. They didn't like their government, so they threw it out and tried to create something better.
That's the exact same thing that happened with the American Revolution, and you're defending that system. So what's the difference then?
Not defending the American Revolution. Well, I mean, people will revolt
Well,
when
it's
they
what
don't
that
get
you're
their
saying
way.
that we should stick with the system they set up then.
I'm saying we have a constitution that has set up
That
purposely
was written when?
circuit breakers. Well, it's also been amended many, many times, right?
Mhm.
Yes. And so it is a living, breathing document that can be amended, and has been many, many times. And it has largely kept us a very stable government, which brings a lot of good things with it. And
Mhm.
not perfect by any means. And I'm not defending the policy decisions that have been made through the years, but it has worked for both progressive as well as conservative, policies. When you start getting frustrated because you're not getting your way, and you start to talk about changing
I'm
processes.
frustrated.
What?
Not why I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated because people are dying for no reason. I'm not frustrated because I'm not getting my way. I'm frustrated because there's people starving in the streets when we have more houses than we have people in this country.
Well, I'm in California, where the opposite is true. So
It's literally not in California. There are more houses empty than there are homeless people in California.
well, I'd like to see that data, because
You
that's
can
not
look it up.
consistent with what we're seeing.
It's rent rates, it's price gouging, and it's like it's a lack of adequate support for people who are struggling with addiction. Like there's a lot of bad stuff happening in this country, and it's not just that leftists aren't getting our way. That's not why we're mad.
Well, no, look, I'm not, and I agree with you. There is a lot of bad stuff happening in this country, and there is a lot of bad things that have always happened in this country, and there are a lot of bad things that happen in the world, and it's frustrating that we're not getting a response to it. But it's because we haven't agreed on a response collectively. You've got your answers, I've got mine, and the Republican Party has theirs, and nobody is holding sway. Nobody is winning the argument.
Governmentally, there's
What's
nobody.
that?
There's nobody representing me or other people who think like me, governmentally.
Do you not vote?
I do.
Then
because
you are being represented.
I'm not, though, because the people who are running don't believe in what the reasons I've voted ever since I've been registered. The reasons I voted has always been the lesser of two evils.
Yeah. And that's the way.
That's not a good way to run a system. Like, should we not try to do better?
And well, I guess, yeah, yes, we should, but what is better?
That's something we all figure out together. But like, instead of thinking, what if we fail? What if we succeed? What if we do better?
I love the idealism, but where you said is, let's all get together and agree, but we're not. We're having the dialogue, and nobody is.
We're not having the dialogue because different people who want to keep it the way that it is are the people with the loudest voices right now. The years of union busting have completely removed any representation for people in the working class. We noticed this at the Great Depression. There was a really vocal anti-capitalist communist party, and the New Deal came from pressures from them. The same thing happened in 2008, and there has been no relief targeted at the people.
Yeah.
None of the same programs that got us out of the Depression happened in 2008, and it's because of decades of destroying workers' voices.
Well, I mean, yes, there has been union busting and union membership is at very, very low levels now. And so I totally agree with that. But it's also true that there's a lot of people who don't believe in unions for whatever reason. And you're not,
Yeah,
and
because
until you
it's
change their
the same amount
minds,
of propaganda. That's why they don't believe in unions, is because of propaganda.
that's your perspective. And I appreciate it. And I agree with it to a degree as well. But it's also true that there's more communication avenues open to people now than ever before. There's information out there. People may not be interested in it. So how do you get people to care about it? It's not,
You start giving them the benefits of the experience of being unionized. The more places that unionize, this is just an example, there's other things too, like healthcare for all. A lot of people don't support it. Ram it through, let them experience having healthcare for everyone and realize that it's the good thing. That's how you do it.
I see. But ramming it through, what you just said, ramming it through is not how our government is set up to work. And you need to win the hearts and minds before you can.
That's not what the other side is. That's not what the fascists are doing. The Republicans aren't just letting the government work how it's supposed to.
They are manipulating. Yes.
That's not so
corrupting.
You can't beat someone with the rules they're not playing by.
All I'm saying, and I don't disagree entirely, but I do say be cautious about the rules you change because they can be used against you. When you remove restrictions and things that, and protections and things that allow the that protect the process, when you remove those things, they can be used against you. And it's been done before.
Against us right now. So
that's how you feel.
What is changing?
These things take a lot of time and a lot of energy. And if you don't win the hearts and minds, you can ram it through. But
if you're being pessimistic and saying it's never going to work,
I'm not saying it's never going to work. I'm saying that to make it work, there needs to be the dialogue and the discussion, and you've got to change people's minds so that they vote your way. And right now,
I don't think voting is the thing to do anymore. That's not.
Well, then that's pretty anti-democratic. And
I'm not saying voting I'm saying voting right now is not the way that I'm going to get, that we're not going to get universal health care by voting at this point. The people who are in office need to either do shit or not. The answer to, oh, the fascists are doing shit is not, well, just vote them down.
But that's the answer. That's our system.
But it doesn't work. When was the time a fascist has been voted out of power?
What do you mean? I mean, we've had the ebb and flow throughout our country's history.
Okay, well, we're really off topic, so I'm gonna just end this down. But anyway, I don't think we have any follow-up items other than needing to research the amount of homes in the country and homeless.
California. I don't dispute the. I'd be curious to see what
California too.
California, what that information looks like for California, because we're trying to build. I mean, for 34 years straight, we had greater population growth than we had home growth.
It's also a lot of the developments they're growing are the things like the suburban cookie cutter homes instead of like high volume living. But
well, no, I agree.
That's a conversation for another day. We're gonna end this because I have stuff to do.
Fair enough. Very good.
All right. Our topic for next week is going to be what's the big deal about death and dying. And in the meantime, you can find us on awkwardfamilyconversations.com, on Twitter at awkwardfamilyc1, on YouTube for the video version with our beautiful faces at Awkward Family Conversations, and anywhere you like to listen, like Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts, for just our lovely voices. At this point, the cats aren't in here when I'm recording, so what's the point of watching the video? It comes out later.
Fair point.
Let us know what you think. Keep the questions and suggestions coming, especially since next week is our season finale. You gotta let us know what you want for season 5.
Yes.
Just be hours of an anarchist arguing with a capitalist.
We will be, a capitalist, but one that believes in heavily regulated capitalism. So it's true.
A Keynesian capitalist.
No, maybe even a little stronger, but stronger Keynesian than stronger capitalist. But still, yes, I believe in the power of capitalism to allocate resources most efficiently. So, but it needs to be moderated significantly. So, very good. Yes, and our next one we will be doing together. So,
Yes, that's true. Very exciting.
Yes, yes, indeed. All right, my love.
Great California.
Yeah, here she comes. So very good. All right. I love you. See you next week. I'll see you before next week, actually.
Yeah,
All
we'll
right.
see you Saturday.
Okay. Bye.